1. It's been an interesting few months for everyone, I can say that. I live with my parents, and I've been on unemployment since early March, due to my work not getting enough business to justify me coming in. I'm a delivery driver for our town's flower shop. I've been blessed to have a decent income through unemployment, but I'm anxiously waiting to go back to work to contribute to society. Plus, I miss my co-workers that make work an absolute blast. I have an account with 2 different bank branches on opposite sides of town, one for checking and one for savings. I don't have a debit card for the savings account with the one bank, so I'd have to go inside the bank in person or through the drive-through window with a special club card with my name and details to access my account. I did this deliberately so I wouldn't be tempted to go through the hassle of dipping into my savings unless I needed to. Before you give me too much credit, the money I'm saving is for a vacation with a friend, hopefully next year, if things go back to being relatively normal. Each week, I would take a portion from my unemployment and set it aside for savings. Well, for some reason, I haven't gotten a payment from unemployment for 2 weeks, and wasn't given rhyme or reason for it, something I'm going to look into. I honestly don't want to complain too much about it because it already gave me more than I expected during this weird time. And like I said, I had a bit in my savings, so when a bill came in that needed taken care of, I didn't have enough in my checking account. On to my savings bank I went. As I pulled into the parking lot and got in line, in one of 3 open lanes, I rolled my eyes at the long line of cars in the first lane that was right next to the bank teller window. There had to have been at least 7 or 8 cars, I swear. Honestly, I don't understand why people do that. Things would go much faster if people actually used all 3 lanes, but I digress. There was 1 car in the middle lane, and no cars in the 3rd that also had access to an ATM. Well, for some reason my spidey senses were tingling, and I pulled up behind the 1 car in the middle lane, rather than go into the empty 3rd lane. I waited patiently for the car in front of me to do their thing, and while I waited, I took out my sketchbook to doodle a little. I must have waited at least 5 to 10 minutes, but eventually the car in front of me pulled away. As I put in a request for the amount I needed, I put the slip and my not-so-special member card into the tube container and pressed the magic button to watch it fly through the tube and into the bank. As soon as I sent the container, I realized I didn't leave a simple smiley face doodle with my note that I usually put on the slips. I've been doing that for a while now, so my paranoid self was worried I was going to come off as hostile for not including the simple symbol. Anxiety is a weird thing, my friends. I waited some more, and the bank teller told me she only needed a signature. She sounded calm for the most part, but something seemed off, but it was a Friday, and she had at least 10 other clients to deal with, so I thought nothing of it. I told her okay, and waited for her to send the container back with my money, and the slip I needed to sign. As I signed, I made sure to write, "Have a nice weekend," with a little smiley face next to it. I sent the signature back. Waiting a moment to make sure she got it, I debated for a few seconds as to whether I should wait until she spoke to me through the speaker to thank me for visiting like the tellers do. But seeing how busy she and her co-workers were, I decided to just go on my merry way to deposit the money into my checking account on the other side of town. As I approached the stop sign, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, but it was from my town. My immediate thought was, oh no, I should have waited for further instructions. Now I'll have to go back to the bank to set things straight. Well, it was from my bank, but it was not what I expected it to be about. "Hi there, this is the bank teller from ABC Bank." "Oh, hello, yes, what can I do for you? Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes, everything's fine. I just wanted to thank you for the note. You see, the lady before you that I helped was yelling at me for like 10 minutes, so that was a really nice gesture." I was stunned. I apologized for the woman's behavior. I understand that everyone is struggling through this pandemic here, and that things are frustrating more so than usual right now, but to take it out on employees just doing their jobs, it breaks my heart. These employees are people just like the rest of us, so to go off on them when they're trying to help is just unacceptable. The bank teller continued to say that it was okay, and some people just don't get it. She thanked me for the note, and I reiterated that she have a good weekend, that I hope the rest of her day goes well, and we hung up. I can honestly say that I believe this was a God thing. If I'd gotten in line at the other empty lane, who knows if my simple little note would have been as impactful as it was for that bank teller to call me about it. I am by no means trying to toot my own horn or anything, but to me it just confirms that even the most simple little gestures can brighten someone's day. Thank you for your time, and I hope this will be a little reminder to keep doing the seemingly little things for others. It might not be a big deal for us, but it could lift the spirits of someone else. 2. So a little bit of backstory. At the time of this incident, I was maybe 15 years old. I was part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters program due to a hectic home life. Whenever I think back in that period in my life, it's mostly happy memories. I say mostly because my Big's wife at the time was a real winner. It's the last week of summer break, and my Big has rented out a really nice cabin at the local campground overlooking a beautiful lake. Now, it wasn't a very big secret that I had a crush on my Big's daughter, but the thing is, we were really good friends, and I never acted on that crush out of respect for her and my net worth. I decided to go take a walk out on the banks of the lake, and the daughter joined me. Nothing happened. If anything, we just talked about our upcoming school year. My Big knew he had nothing to be worried about, but her mother, aptly named Karen, dreamt up all sorts of insane scenarios. I guess she figured we were going to reenact that scene in From Here to Eternity. And as I stated, our walk was about as innocent as it got. The conversation was mostly her talking to me about how she was going to miss me once her senior year was over. She and I had already begun the process of picking out a college, and once this year was over, she would be shipping out. Their daughter got emotional, and she gave me a tearful hug. I'm guessing Karen saw this. We were sitting down around the campfire my Big built, and everything's going fine. We're telling ghost stories, shooting the breeze, Karen included. I have no reason to suspect there was anything wrong. It was approaching 10 p.m. and my Big went to bed. The daughter soon followed afterwards. I'm getting tired, and so I politely excused myself in order to go to bed. That's when I feel this harpy dig her claws into my shoulder. A second later, I can feel her hot breath on my neck as she whispers into my ear.
If I ever find out you've done anything to my daughter, I will cut your cock off and wear it like a necklace. Take that thought to bed with you. My daughter deserves better than trash like you.
I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. We headed back to my Big Brother's place, and I said nothing. He asked me if I was okay, and I just said that my allergies were acting up, and I wasn't feeling too great. We get back to his place, and I asked him if I can lay down for a nap. He tells me to go right ahead, and while I'm asleep, leaves to run some errands. I wake up about an hour and some change later to find Karen sitting around with a couple of her friends in the kitchen, drinking wine and eating expensive cheesecake, while holding a conversation where she refers to me as her husband's white trash project, and tries to make herself sound like a saint. I was mortified. I went back to the guest bedroom and packed my stuff. Truth is, yes, I came from a poor family. My mother had multiple handicaps, and most days she couldn't even get out of bed. From the age of 14 to 21, I raised 3 siblings. Despite all that, I had no hygiene problems. Even though I was a jeans and t-shirt kind of kid, I dressed well, and I generally treated people around me with respect. So that white trash comment hit pretty hard. That, combined with the previous night's threat, was enough to elicit a few tears. I snuck out the front door. I'm out on the porch, waiting for my Big to get back so he could take me home. As I'm sitting there, his daughter rounds the corner of the street. Apparently she went out for her afternoon job. When her mother's friends showed up, she couldn't stand them either, and she sees me sitting there obviously crying. She sits next to me, puts an arm on my shoulder, asking me what's wrong. I don't say anything at first, but she keeps pressing the matter. So eventually I came clean and told her what I overheard. She just gets a blank expression, and I see her eye twitch, asking me to hold her Walkman. For those young listeners who aren't sure, a Walkman was a mobile cassette tape player. She walks inside, and less than a minute later I hear her screaming at her mother. I hear her mother scream at her, "Well, if you're stupid," insert derogatory racial terms directed at Vietnamese people here. "Ass wants to get an STD from that goth," insert more slurs here. "On my front porch, be my guest." Her daughter started screaming at her in Vietnamese, eventually breaking back into English long enough to call her a stuck-up alcoholic bitch. I heard a loud smack. Her daughter comes back onto the porch with a welt across her face. She simultaneously put that bitch Karen in her place and took a slap from me. In truth, I felt horrible. I still feel horrible about that. But that's the kind of friend her daughter was. Even though we were just friends, she had that ride-or-die attitude since day one. Eventually, my big came home to find us walking up the street with my travel bag in tow, stopped the car, let us in, and his daughter told him everything. Well, everything from the night before leading up to that afternoon. My big went gaunt. He had no idea his wife was that two-faced. He spent a good half hour apologizing to me. Unfortunately, at that point, the damage had been done for a good long while. This was literally my only respite from the chaos at home, and weekly visits were cut down to monthly visits. He literally only picked me up to hang out at his place whenever his wife was out of town, delivering a dissertation or something along those lines. Eventually, life happened as it does, and we all fell out of touch. But thanks to the advent of social media, we all got back in contact with one another, and recently had a reunion of sorts, with one exception. The reunion was one person lighter. You see, the final visit we had before I moved away, I had a friend who was trying to talk me into joining him in pro wrestling school. I was all for it, at least for a while. During that conversation, Karen, 4 glasses of wine in, very openly said, "Well, that seems like a very fitting white trash profession for you." A couple of days later, he served her with divorce papers. I'm much older now, and during the conversation I had with his daughter and her husband, she enlightened me on some other things her mother used to pull after I left. In her own head, she viewed me as a chronic masturbator. So as soon as I left, she would bleach the sheets in the hottest water she could stand. She would check her beddings for head lice and bed bugs. At one point in time, she drunkenly asked her daughter to prove she was still a virgin. People go on about Karens being terrible to them when they're at the workplace. I can assure you, they're even worse in an everyday setting. This particular one was definitely an alcoholic sociopath who took pleasure in making the lives of those around her an absolute living hell. From what I understand, she's remarried. I feel for her husband in so many levels. I don't wish bad on many people, but in her case, I hope she has a perpetual allergy attack that causes her to shit her pants every time she sneezes. Karen, you are the worst of the worst, and you should have ended up in a lotion-stained napkin on your daddy's floor. 3. This happened to me in 1986. The term incel hadn't been coined yet, but this guy clearly was one. Went on a blind date with a guy my friend set me up with, and the guy turned out to be a total weirdo. When I met him at an Italian restaurant I'd picked, he looked reasonably normal. Brown eyes, black hair, clear skin, clean, reasonably fit and good looking. His clothes were very conservative and, well, ugly. Think 50s suit in baby shit brown, tan duck shoes, and a puke green pencil tie. He wasn't much older than me, but he dressed like a 60-year-old burned-out history teacher who'd given up on life. I try not to judge, but damn. He greeted me like a normal person, and the conversation was pretty normal as well. But the normal only lasted for 10 minutes. Then the cringy weirdness began. In earnest. While we picked out appetizers, he slowly looked me up and down, commenting on different parts of my body, especially my hips, which he called, well, rounded, child-bearing hips. He talked about me meeting his mom the next day. Showed me her picture. She looked like Tammy Faye Baker, only with even more makeup and on crack. And how I'd like his church. When it was time for the main course, he kept trying to order for me, talked over me several times, which really pissed me off. He told me we would get married next month, that I needed to get a dress. He later suggested I wear his mom's dress, ew. Change religions, wear proper, more conservative clothes. I was in a long loose skirt and loose peasant blouse. Cut my hair, it was too long, in his opinion, and too red. Move in with him, and his mother, before the wedding to ensure I was protected, and went on to say what a good wife I'd be. My name is not Brandy. By dessert, He had told me how many kids I would have, 3, their genders, boys, and even had names his mother had picked out. He said all this with a finality that was beyond crazy. Remember, I'd just met this guy. It was our first date. But it was as if, in his mind, it was a done deal and that I wasn't really a person to him, more like a possession or a save. I was horrified. Did this fucker really think I would go meekly to marry him after just one date? Just how much crack had this guy or his mother smoked? Carefully sculling my face, I got up. I told him I had to go to the bathroom, took my purse, told him it was female stuff, and to order something chocolate for me, and headed to the bathroom, which was through a doorway and around a corner near the kitchen. Once out of sight, I quietly asked our waiter who was walking by if there was a back door. The waiter had been there through a lot of it and was as creeped out by this guy's behavior as I was. He had suggested another worker take me through the kitchen and out the back door, while he went to our table and suggested different desserts to the guy, to distract him long enough for me to escape, and escape I did. I booked it out of there and got on the first bus back to my house. Took me an hour since the restaurant was on the other side of the city. The phone was ringing when I finally got home, knowing damn well it was him and pissed at the audacity of this shithead to think that I, a total stranger, would marry him. WTF. I answered, and immediately he yelled at me, demanding to know why I had embarrassed him like that. Told me how he would forgive me if I got my ass back to him so I could, finally, meet his mom and get the ball rolling. The way he talked, you'd think we'd been dating for years instead of only meeting that day. Thank all that is holy he didn't know where I lived. I told him I had zero interest in meeting him, his church, his mom, or becoming a broodmare. I told him to please go fuck himself and never call me again. He was not one to easily give up, however, and kept calling for 3 more days, until my dad grabbed the phone and put the fear of him into the guy. Mom had first grabbed the phone and told him to leave me alone, but since she didn't have a penis, he ignored her, threatening to neuter him with extreme prejudice if he came anywhere near me. I also called my friend and told her what happened. Turned out he was her cousin, and she knew he was a weirdo. He and his mom belonged to a Pentecostal church that was more like a cult, but set up the date anyway because he was still a virgin and needed a wife. After calling her some very creative things and suggesting several more implausible things she'd do to herself, I told her to never come near me again. I told everybody what she had done, which was good because she tried to set up another of our friends with that weirdo, and she was unceremoniously booted out from our friend group. Never saw her or her creepy cousin again. Note, when this occurred, I was only 16. He was 22. 4. This happened about 7 or so years ago. I was 20, female, and 5'2" with a baby face. So you could say I was used to being stopped by truancy officers. I was looking to make a little bit of money without actually having a job. I was in college and didn't want to dedicate too much time to anything other than schoolwork. I lived at home and my tuition was paid, so getting a job really wasn't all that important. On occasion, however, I did odd tasks for my friends and family for a bit of pocket money. My father was, and still is, a middle school teacher. While he is well loved, paperwork isn't really his thing. As such, I would regularly grade his students' work, nothing too intense, multiple choice and such. Every now and again, I would take a day to go in and assist him in reorganizing the classroom itself. It was always a great time. The students were amazing, and I got to see my father doing what he loved. On this particular occasion, he had lunchroom duty, where he basically supervised the cafeteria and made sure the children didn't get too rowdy. Being a bored college student, I followed him down rather than stay in the empty classroom by myself. Once we were down in the cafeteria, I mostly just became a wallflower and kept out of the way while he called tables of preteens up for their meal. There were other teachers around assisting, and a few would wave to me when spotted. Most knew me from previous occasions that I've been there, and those who didn't figured out the situation pretty quickly by asking myself or their coworkers. I hadn't been in a middle school cafeteria since I had been in middle school, but it wasn't anything overly impressive. It was a regular cafeteria, loud, messy, and full of children. I quickly became disinterested and simply leaned against the wall, drifting off into La La Land. Most people were content to just mill around me, but not everyone. I can feel someone staring at me, and after a moment I checked my surroundings. A stocky figure was standing in front of me, clearing their throat aggressively. Giving them my attention, I was met with an angry-looking older woman that I did not know, with her hands folded over her chest. She glared down at me with a frown, tapping her foot in annoyance. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to tell me what she wanted.
Didn't you hear me tell everyone to sit down?
No, actually. I honestly didn't because I wasn't listening. I barely listened in middle school when I actually attended. I didn't.
Well, I did.
Good for you?
Excuse you? So?
She raised her eyebrows and gave an exaggerated shrug.
Why are you still standing?
By this point, I was getting more annoyed than confused. I still didn't know what she wanted from me, but I don't like people talking to me in general. And I definitely don't like people talking down to me. So I'll admit I got a little snarky with her. I'm still standing because I don't want to sit down.
Now you listen here, young lady. You are going to sit down right this instant.
No, I'm not.
No? I don't know who you think you are, but as long as you're a student in this school, you will listen.
It was at this moment that I knew we'd screwed up. I, of course, wasn't a middle school student, and I was highly offended that she thought I was. While small and unimposing, I'd certainly hit puberty hard enough to not be mistaken for a 7th grader. Still, I tried to be understanding in that mistakes had been made, and I tried to backtrack. Oh, I'm not...
Yes, you are.
I don't even go here.
Oh, so now you don't go here, huh? Then why are you here? Go on, tell me another lie.
Quite literally backed into a corner, I began looking around for my father, but I couldn't see him from where I was standing. I didn't need him to save me, however. I didn't know if I'd be able to convince this woman that 1, I wasn't a child, 2, I didn't attend the school, and 3, I wasn't a pervert trespassing in a middle school, before I had gotten either detention or arrested. That's when a random 12-year-old came to my rescue.
USS Robertson, your dad is looking for you.
Oh, your father is here, is he?
Grinning and twisting her head as if she was a snake being charmed. The woman looks extremely pleased. Turning to the kid, she smirks wide and gestures with her hands.
And just where is her father?
Right there.
The kid waves down my dad, calling his attention over to us.
She's over here, Mr. USS Robertson.
The woman frowned at me, but all I could think of to say was, I'm 20, but he's still my dad. Which didn't make all that much sense. Once the lunch aide became aware of what was happening, she left. She didn't apologize. She didn't double down. She didn't even wait for my father to come over. She just turned bright red and immediately left the room. I never actually told my dad because I don't think he'd let me live down getting saved by a 12-year-old. 5. This took place before smartphones and the like in the late 90s. To understand this story, you must know that the company that printed the local phone books did misprint the local locksmith's number in the wrong book. Where we lived, all the numbers started with 421, 423, or 425, and my grandparents' number was 423-5625, and the locksmith's number was 421-5625, which spelled lock. Ironically, I got to hear both sides of this story because my friend's parents were the locksmiths. Well, the situation so no one had to change numbers was the locksmith bought and installed an answering machine at my grandparents' house, and recorded the following message. Hello, you have reached the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Jones. If you are trying to reach A1 Lock, there was a mistake in the phone book. Please call 421 Lock, and we will be glad to help you. What we would just do was my grandparents would let everything go to the machine, set to only 2 rings, and if it was for them, we would just say something like, Grandma, it's me, pick up, and they would then answer. Also of note, during the summers I would stay at my grandparents' house because I would help Grandpa on the ranch, and we would get up at 5:30. It was just easier for me to stay there than him to drive and pick me up. Well, the summer after the misprint at about 1:45 a.m., I hear Grandpa getting upset from the room I was in. and I went to see what was up. I see him on the phone repeatedly saying, "Look, lady, you have the wrong number, call 421. After about the 5th time I hear him say it, he slams down the phone. To calm down, he tells me that he woke up to use the restroom and stretch his bad knee, and heard the phone ringing. It would ring twice, the machine would get it. But the person was hanging up before it barely said hello, and they would call back. So he answered to just tell them to call the correct number, because apparently it must have been important, because he heard it happen 5 or 6 times in a row. Once on the phone, a very drunken lady refused to believe that the phone company would ever misprint the numbers in the phone book, and demanded to talk to the owner because she knows him personally. This entire time he is telling me this, the phone is doing the hang up and redial. With this being my friend's family company, I didn't want them to lose the business, so the next time it rang I answered and told her I was the after-hours phone service and got the location. She had locked her keys in the car, and then just called the correct number, told them what happened and gave them the information. Here is where the fun begins. The next day after the ranch work, I went over to that friend's house, which was normal. We all kinda hung out there. While there, his brother walks up to tell me what happened when I hung up. Apparently, before going, he called her to confirm the location, was outside a bar, and to approve the pricing of $35 for the unlock plus a $20 after-hours service fee. She agreed, and he got in the van and went. Since this is very easy to do, it only took him about 2 minutes to unlock the car, but noticed the woman was very drunk, and the keys seemed to be a spare on a ring by itself. When she saw it, it only took him a couple of minutes to unlock. She refused to pay, saying he was price gouging her. He simply tossed the key back in the car, locked the door and closed it, saying she will have to pay a second unlock and service fee now. Her response? To call the cops and scream at him about how she is best friends with the owner and he was going to get fired. He had no clue who she was and just let her scream without saying he is the owner's son. When the cops arrived, they took both stories and sided with him. They made her pay him all the money in advance before they let him unlock the car. She quickly grabs the key, hopped in the car, and started to drive off, only to immediately get pulled over for drunk driving the moment she hit the street. She even pulled back into the parking lot. It was so fast. Apparently the bar had confiscated her keys for being too drunk to drive, and that was in fact her spare he got out. She was arrested for a DUI, and the police had the car impounded. Karma is a bitch. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, number 27, I think. Yes. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. As I've been recording this, the rain's been keeping me company. That means summer is well and truly gone by this point. The rain has returned. Not that we didn't have rain before, but it's the kind of rain that's accompanied by winds that kind of rattle my letterbox, which is annoying when I'm recording. Oh, my voice sounds a bit rough there, doesn't it? Which is annoying while I'm recording, but it's especially distressing when I'm playing video games like Phasmophobia and it happens. And especially if I'm playing on my own. So I'm kind of really I'm focusing, I'm listening for sounds in the ghost and all. Then suddenly you hear your letterbox go. And when the wind's really bad, it can kind of go as if someone's actually outside, which they wouldn't be at this time of night. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.